Melvin and his wife Joanna and family pay close attention to detail, and he manages all aspects of the operation extremely well. I was fortunate enough to convince Melvin to take part in this webinar as our host farm family because I really thought he would do an excellent job of showcasing his methods of recording data and tracking information that mattered to the management style he wanted. He hasn't invested heavily in technology to retrieve information, but he has invested time in creating charts and record keeping material to give him what he wants to make informed decisions with on the farm. Along with the Ontario Corn-Fed Beef Quality Assurance records as a base, Melvin has expanded his data collection format to further unpack more information that he desires for making management decisions. Yeah, we're just going to chat back and forth, and Melvin's going to discuss some of the operations of what goes on and how he makes management decisions and that sort of thing on his farm operation. So I guess we might as well start off with one of the longer ones, maybe, Melvin, is how do you manage risk on your farm with the cattle, crops, all entities?
So I guess one thing I do is try to track the cost of production, because that's the only way you know what your cost is if you track that. And I have a fairly simple method of doing that. When I use a feed mixer in my telehandler, I just have a little book where I keep track of all the feed that I put in the mixer. That's how I keep track of that. And as far as buying fertilizer and seed and that type of stuff, I try to watch the markets and buy some stuff ahead, which has worked pretty good the last couple of years. Never know in the future, but
right, we've seen prices fluctuate tremendously over the last couple of years here. So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. Another question is you've been feeding calves on a yearly basis for a number of years, I think. So is there any reason, or what's your reason for running calves versus yearlings or some other weights of cattle?
Well, one of them is I can bring in calves in the fall and ship the fats in the fall. And I have a fair bit of roughage on the farm, so that works in good with smaller calves. Hay and haylage and corn silage is what I feel I can get the most per acre off my farm. And it's the lowest cost per pound of gain is the smaller weights.
Right.
Be the main reason likely.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of other things going, so I don't always have to start off calves. I can kind of do that in the fall, and then they're here for like 300 some days.
Right. Spread your workload over.
That's right.
Yeah. Good. So, your homegrown crops versus what you purchased. I think you mentioned in the video there that you buy in some protein supplements and premix DDGs, for example. Is that about it, or do you purchase in some other grains?
No, I don't. I actually sell some grains because I don't feed all the wheat that I grow, but I do feed a fair bit of it. And then I have my own storage for dry corn and wheat. I have two separate bins. So I kind of watch the markets a bit. And if like last spring it goes real high, I sold some.
Right.
Kind of to the max that I didn't need.
Right. That's good. So you mentioned about your keeping track of inventory and of your feeds and that sort of thing. For doing your cattle closeouts, how do you arrive at those real costs, and so that you know what the cattle part of your operation contributes to your bottom line?
Well, that's kind of a tough question because it depends if I take my actual cost of gain or if I take what I could have got if I sold them. sold the crop.
Right.
But it does cushion my cost of production by quite a bit if you have on-farm feed storage. Because the last number of years, it hasn't cost to grow it what it would have cost in the last year to buy it in.
That's right.
Now, if you had a crop failure, that would change that story big time. But we've
Right.
been fortunate enough to have enough rain. It was barely enough this summer, but
Mhm.
we still had a good yield.
And with this year, with the crop input's going to be higher on average than the last year, then that reflects that bottom line as well.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, yeah,
Because really the cattle the last 2 years have been getting feed from the previous year every time, so the cost was actually lower than it will be this coming year if all input costs keep rising.
right, right. Yeah, and your closeout will no doubt help determine whether you wish to contract cattle forward or just what you want to do in that respect.
Yeah, and for that I have it's kind of a, well, my wife made it actually. It's a spreadsheet she made for me.
Mm-hmm.
And there I can enter my incoming costs, the weights, the trucking to get them here, because they all come from the west.
Right.
And then I can play around with the numbers if what'll be left over if I have, like, let's say 320 or 330, or you can play around with that, and that's kind of how I figure out if a certain price is a good price, or if it's like, I mean, sometimes waiting doesn't help, because if it
Right.
never rises, you're screwed. But
Yeah.
but it does give you a good idea if it's time to do some, or I never do all of them, but I always do some.
Yeah, the secret is to know your costs.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, we'll switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about your corn stover and how important that residue is for your operation.
Well, it's quite important because, and anybody out there that has lots of wheat, that's fine. Wheat straw is great bedding, but I never seem to have enough of that. So then we have combine as a chopping corn head,
Mm-hmm.
and then we take a big V rake in and we rake it up, and then make round bales of it. And that's what I use for bigger cattle. I still like the wheat straw for starting off calves. It's a cleaner bedding than corn bales can be. This fall, corn stover came off really dry, 10-12%, 2-3 days after the combine went through. So and if for anybody that wants to do that, if you have a chopping corn head, you're going to have stock stompers on every corn row in order to get the V rake to rake it. Otherwise you can't rake it.
Okay.
Or if you don't have a chopping head, you got to go through with a chopper and then rake it, whichever works.
Right. That's good to know. So, how important is it to have like team members as part of your operation? Your banker, your accountant, crop advisor, that sort of thing. What sort of role do they play in your operation?
So the crop advisor would be the one that plays the biggest role, because that's how we decide. We put a value. I test the manure going out, and I have actually 2 separate tests. I do the bedding for calves is lower value manure than for the fats. So we keep track where which goes into the fields, and then that all gets figured in when we're planning how much fertilizer we're going to need for growing corn.
You use outside sources to help with your management.
So. Yeah, and I do talk to the banker the odd time too.
That's good. So, I guess another question would be in regards to what your standard operating procedures might be in regards to about management, tracking performance of the cattle and that sort of thing. So do you have a specific order of importance that those different items might play?
Not necessarily. Well, they're all kind of important, each one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that there's a big difference which one.
Right. Bunk management is important all the
Yeah,
way
that's
along.
definitely important.
Yeah.
Especially, yeah, bunk management is a little tricky one, especially we do some custom work too, and then it's
Okay.
a little hard some days to, if we know we have a long day doing custom work, I'll feed a little more in the morning type of thing to try to tie them over. But generally I try to feed within the hour, morning and evening.
Right.
But it doesn't always happen, but it should.
Right. Yeah, it's a balancing act between the seasons. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that
Anyway,
goes with other stuff too, like cleaning out pens. And I try to clean out pens every 7 to 10 days. But if I see a stretch of good weather coming, I'll do it a little early maybe, because I know I won't have time when we're out in the
Right.
field. So
Well, that's good.